older adults. And we are blessed to have Paul Iarvino with us today as our presenter. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items that we will check in with you about. We're then going to introduce you to Paul, our presenter. We'll have our main presentation, and after that, we'll do Q&A. And then we have a couple of announcements for you before you leave. If by chance today you're having trouble with your audio or visual, you've got a lot of options. You can keep us streaming in video on your computer, but call in from your phone with audio only. If you're having trouble with your bandwidth, sometimes calling in by phone also helps. Put in any other tech support questions you might have into the chat box to presenters only, and Gretchen will be happy to help you along the way. Speaking of the chat box, if you'd like to talk to everyone, make sure you choose that function first. And I know Paul will be asking for some people to raise their hands and come off their mics today too. We want to encourage you to use that chat, answer questions as Paul asks them, and share your experiences in chat. I know others love to hear from their peers, and we'll be monitoring, questions as we move along. I could not be more pleased to introduce you to Paul Iarvino. Paul is a community activist, speaker, documentation, and storyteller. Paul caught his second wind at the age of 50 and started sharing stories on stage. He retired from his 26-year career in aging a few years later to devote more time to perfecting his craft with audiences, and eventually grew his practice to teaching, coaching, and producing. Now, a decade later, at the age of 60, and after experiencing the ups and downs of the pandemic, he has just released his first book, COVIDology, Sharing Life Lessons from Behind the Mask. This anthology features many first-time authors and poets and includes Paul's COVID short story, Metamorphosis. You can follow Paul at ourboldvoices.com. And Paul, I'll now turn it over to you and we'll get started with the presentation.
Great, thanks so much. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I'm getting a message. I can't share my screen yet, but I think,
I think I have to stop sharing.
Yeah.
And not sure how to do that.
I can see your screen. Do folks want to put into the chat box if they can see Paul's screen?
I can.
Oh, good.
Can they?
Is that the rest of the host slide?
I don't see my own slides yet.
Okay.
It says I can't start sharing while another participant is sharing.
Okay, so you got to stop sharing, Darlene.
I know sharing is caring, but I don't know. It's just a stop sharing. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to share screen. Hold on here. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Yay. Okay, perfect. Okay, here we go. Thanks so much for having me today. When Darlene and I were talking about the topic today, I thought, well, wait a second. I've been working in the field of aging forever, and I guess I'm an older adult, so we'll just kind of go with that. And so here's the learning objectives that we hope to accomplish today, which is learning how older adults are gaining social connectivity through these virtual platforms like the one we're in right now, review approaches to assisting older adults with limited technology skills or financial resources. There's often barriers to getting online, and so we'll talk a little bit about that, and share or identify at least 2 hands-on practices to help build an age-friendly volunteer management toolbox. And I'm hoping to learn from all of you because you're great teachers. I was on the call last month and I was really impressed with a lot of the knowledge that all of you have. So my goal is to learn at least 2 from you all. We're going to start with an icebreaker question that you'll be chatting in your response. And for this icebreaker question, I want you to be thinking about a number a number, not a range of numbers. And I'm being kind of unfair in a way, but I just want to get the first number that comes to mind, and there's no right or wrong answer. So I would like you to chat in the box. When I say older adult, what age is that to you? Whoops, I
Paul,
need a
we're
number.
seeing the presenter slide view again.
Uh-oh, so how do I? All right, I think I have to do an Alt Tab. That's not it, is it?
No.
All right.
Oh, everyone, while Paul is working on that, he wants to know what age is
Oops. Sorry.
age old?
What age is an older adult to them?
What age
Yes.
is an older adult? Great, got it. Okay.
So can people still chat? I can't see the chat because I'm using the wrong slide deck.
I've got it disabled for some reason. I'm going in to fix that, but you can put it in the question part too, and I'll be able to tell you.
Okay.
And so, Paul, I will,
Yes.
since we're having trouble with the chat, why don't I just chime in? I first of all can
Yes.
see your screen just fine for right now. So when I think of older adult, I think of maybe someone 50 or older, and I certainly fit into that demographic. And so that's what I think of when I think sort of an older adult.
Got it. 50 and older. Okay. And so should I get out of this? So we're going to have the same problem throughout if I don't change slides. Is that correct? Or figure this out?
We can see your slides. I think you can just keep going.
Got it. Okay. Gretchen, we're going to put Gretchen on the spot. What is an older adult to you, Gretchen? What age is that?
You know, I used to think it was 65, but now that I'm 65, I feel older. So yeah, I would say 55 to 60 as an older adult.
Yes. Okay. The reason why I pose this question is to have us sort of just stop for a little bit and to reflect on this, is that we often hear the term older adults, but we never really define what that means. And it varies, right? So I just turned 60 and I'm like, well, does that mean I'm an older adult? And we think about program eligibility, 60 and older qualifies you for some of the Older American Act programs like information assistance and legal and all these things. But then you have to be 65 to be on Medicare, so it really changes. And what about that senior discount? I started getting it at 50 at some places and 55 at another. And some places I have to be 62 and I'm not there yet. So it's important for us to realize that when I speak today, I'm not speaking for all older adults. And my friends over at the Urban League Senior Center here in Portland, they would probably call me what they say is a junior senior. That's their way of saying a younger senior, So there's many different experiences, and my experience as a 60-year-old is going to be very different than someone who's 90 or 95 years old. So we're a very broad demographic is what I'm trying to say.
And
okay.
Paul, I do now see some answers coming in. So I know you're about to advance, but let me just read these to you.
Yes, please.
55 and up, 70, 55, 85, 65 plus, 65. Joanna says the older she gets, the higher I think the age of older adults. I think 70 plus. Yeah. So those are our answers,
yes.
And it certainly is fine to put your answers in the Q&A. I will verbalize them to Paul.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just this morning, taking what used to be called the AARP's 55 Alive, now it's called the AARP Safer Driver course, and I'm going to get a 5% discount. Yay! I'm all about the discount. So I wouldn't be eligible for that when I was younger, but I am now. So anyway, there's a lot to learn. Okay. All right. Thank you for everybody who chimed in. So I have some observations about what I learned during the pandemic and how it affected older adults. And so what I found is that there were so many inequities. The inequities were already there, but they were magnified during the pandemic. And a couple of examples is I volunteer at a local senior center, and we did outreach to older adults to ask them, like what needs did they have? And it was really focused around, access to food and, communicating with their doctors, but also to just say, hey, we're going to start doing these virtual programs. Do you have email? And a very high percentage of people were like, no, I don't have email, or I have email, but I don't have an ability to go online. So it really wasn't favored by a lot of the older adults that we called. And also, one of the things I realized is that many folks who relied on libraries to check their email or to do searches, the libraries were closed. And many folks I talked to who lived in some of the subsidized housing where they had these computer labs, in the building, those were closed too. So it really created a hardship for a lot of folks, especially low-income older folks. And so I have a bunch of slides here. I won't read them, but as I was reading through this report, I couldn't help but realize how close this was to my personal experience. And if you have a chance to read this report, I highly recommend it. So here's an example of how it's many people are old school, she's saying, and it's like the Old West. And so people, just were not sort of tuned in. And this was an interesting revelation for me. So this person from San Francisco says, internet connectivity is a utility. It's like water and everyone needs it. And I remember jokingly talking about like the younger generation, you need water and food and shelter. And I would just kind of just be funny and say, yeah, and younger people, they need to have Wi-Fi, they need to have access to internet. But, it really is true, especially when we were in isolation. And so much of what we do now, including this virtual training, we do need to have connectivity. So it's something that I hadn't really thought of before, and I was able to see that more during the pandemic. How did we address disparities? And a lot of this was things that just came out naturally, that there was just not a good plan moving forward. So there was pandemic funding, and some of your agencies, I'm sure, received pandemic funding. And I was approaching a local organization to say, you know what, I'm doing these groups for older adults, but there are so many people who can't access technology. They can't afford it. They don't have the technical training. So I basically begged a local nonprofit to write a grant, and I sent them the talking points. And what she said to me is, she said, hey, Paul, we can only apply for food insecurity and shelter. And I said, there are so many isolated older adults. Super long story short, they went ahead and they applied for the food insecurity and the shelter, and they also added a mental health component. And this is fairly early in the pandemic when we really weren't talking about mental health as much. And they got the funding. And so I didn't know it, but they built me into the grant. So we started a cohort, and we had accidental involvement with AmeriCorps. So it's just so perfect that we had these AmeriCorps folks who were signed up to help with food insecurity in the schools. And guess what? The schools were closed. So we were able to get the AmeriCorps folks involved, and they helped with training and some wraparound supports, building documentation. So it was helping older adults with the technology. Here's another quote here. And it can be intimidating, right? So when we work with these older adults, we're able to sort of match the technology that worked best for them, because there's so many questions. It's like, what do I need? How does it work? And where is the support to go along with it? Okay, so here's something I just want to ask folks. And if you raise your hand, I'd love to be able to have you elevated. And this is kind of where I'd like to learn from you, and for everybody to learn from each other, is that, have you addressed technology disparities? How have you addressed the technology disparities during the pandemic, and or how has this contributed to equity and inclusion? So you can take a stab at either. of those questions. I would love to kind of get your thoughts. And if we have you elevated, then you can just be one of the sort of like panelists like us, so you don't have to type into the chat box. So love to get your thoughts on that.
So if you have something you'd like to say, I can allow you to talk. Just put it in the chat box that you'd like to say something, or you are welcome to type in the chat as well. So I'm watching.
Thanks, Gretchen.
You bet.
Yeah. And the second part of that is how do we think about equity and inclusion when just sometimes the technology itself can be off-putting for older adults?
So as we're waiting for someone to answer, I want to say that we have a group of older adult volunteers that travel around the country and go to different locations to help Habitat for Humanity build. They're called the RV Caravanners. And we really love to pair them with our collegiate groups that come in, because I think that they have a lot to offer in terms of skill, in terms of safety, and the collegiate groups coming in really don't really know any of that. And one thing about technology, which maybe seems like a little bit of a flip, Paul, is that our older adults actually help our collegiate groups stay off their phones and pull their earphones out. And so just to give you that as sort of an opposite of what you're asking.
Excellent, excellent. And what a great intergenerational connection. It looks like Kelsey is going to chime in.
And it looks like you're there. Go for it, Kelsey.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'll take a stab at it. I work with RSVP, so Retired and Senior Volunteer Program. And during the pandemic, we have a large number of volunteers who were volunteering in the schools with elementary students and reading with them. And of course, the schools closed. And so we tried to do a virtual reading buddy system where we provided tablets for volunteers and headphones where they could log on and do it from home. As expected, a lot of volunteers just didn't feel comfortable with that. And those who did try it, the feedback was that it was difficult. It was difficult to hear, and it was challenging for the students as well, for them to stay focused on their Chromebook. And so what we developed instead was a pen pal program. So it was still in partnership with the schools and the students, but it was just through mail and writing letters. And so it still helped us to move forward with our goal of education and helping kids in our community. And the kids absolutely loved getting a personalized letter. And then the other thing that we realized, which I didn't think about before, but I think it contributed to equity and inclusion, not only on the technology aspect, but also there were some more volunteers who came to us for this opportunity because they were homebound, because they didn't have a car or transportation, but they still wanted to volunteer. So it was a way to help engage more individual volunteers in the area who normally could not go into the schools anyway.
Excellent. Oh my goodness, I love that. And again, it's one of those things when with the pandemic, we didn't have sort of a guidebook to say, then do this, right? So this whole thing about letter writing, what an absolutely brilliant idea to get people to stay connected in a different form, but it worked very nicely. Great, thank you. Do we have anybody else that's raised their hand or in the chat box?
I don't see of anyone, and there is something in the chat. I can read it. It's from Jerry. It says,
okay.
I returned to volunteering at SAGE, LGBTQ+ Senior Center, with gradual steps to in-person meal programs. There were some stumbles and advances forward. They had provided virtual interactions during the pandemic. However, I don't know how that went with my local professional association, which is NYAVA in New York City. Some of our older members did struggle as we moved away from in-person workshops and social events.
Great. That's a good segue, because I will be talking a little bit about sort of now what. So yes, and also even with Darlene's comments with the intergenerational, that just is coming up in my slides ahead. So I'm going to move along. Those are great pieces of information. So
I've got
here we one more. Okay, good. Yes.
From Rebecca that says, we've provided training on technology to our volunteers. I found that I had to be very patient in that process.
Yes. I think if, but for the fact that we had the AmeriCorps, we would have really stumbled, because we just didn't have enough support. And the AmeriCorps folks were just very motivated, since they weren't able to do what they were brought in to do. So again, that took a lot of ingenuity, I think, to say, hey, can you shift gears? Can we be flexible here? Great. Anything else before I advance ahead, Gretchen?
Go for it, Paul.
Okay. So I'm going to do a case study. What does that mean for an older adult volunteer? Guess what? I'm going to be talking about myself. So this is my profile here. I'm a 60-year-old male volunteer. I had 2 unique roles as a volunteer, and I would be sort of like working with you all in terms of my volunteer manager. So I was a volunteer driver, and I volunteered at the senior center prior to the pandemic. So what happened during the pandemic? So here's me, I'm driving for Metropolitan Family Services in Portland, and I was taking older adults to senior centers, medical appointments, grocery shopping, and I even had a monthly trip called Paul's Extravaganza. And once a month we would go to different places. And a lot of times it was more about the ride itself than the destination, because people would get together in their shuttle bus, and they would have these great conversations. It was just a great thing, all that prior to the pandemic. And then I volunteered for Hollywood Senior Center. I brought a lot of new programming to the center, including storytelling. And this picture here, it's so funny with older adults. One of the things is that I found that folks didn't really want to sort of like toot their own horn and they'd say, well, my neighbor, I said, well, what about you? What do you think about that? So I ended up getting these shirts for one of the events. It's all about me. Who's it about? It's about me. So anyway, we did a lot of great programming in person. And of course, you know what happens during the pandemic, everything shut down. Okay, so what happened to Paul during the pandemic? I got COVID myself in March of 2020. I was an early case here, and I was miserable for 2 solid weeks, and everything I had was canceled anyway, all my self-employment, all of my volunteer work, and it was a very difficult time for me. I was really depressed, and I didn't have the structure or the purpose. I didn't really know what I wanted to do now that my schedule was clear. So now what, Well, I discovered Zoom. So I started doing a group for the Hollywood Senior Center. It was more just like, let me just try this one time. And it worked really well, to the point where I started doing a number of these cohorts, if you will. Each one was very different. And Metropolitan Family Services, the agency that I volunteer for, they were the ones that completed a grant application, and then we started Zooming seniors, is what they called themselves. I started one cohort in 2020. The funding went away. New funding, little bits and pieces became available, and they just started their 5th cohort recently, which is pretty amazing. So this is all through Zoom, and with the funding, we're able to buy people the iPads or the Chromebooks, and also help get people for Internet Essentials, get them qualified. So they have like a little case management piece built in, which is really nice to support them. And then what about my role? Well, now I'm doing things differently now. So that's my green Kia Soul. And this is me taking someone in my neighborhood who recently had cataract surgery. So she was not able to sort of navigate the computer system, because I don't know how it was in your state, but in Oregon, you had to fight online for appointments. But if you have, if you have cataracts, you're not going to be in a very good position to sort of navigate that. So I was helping this person not only get an appointment, but actually drove her to what do you call it, like a big fair. It was on county fairgrounds in Clackamas County. So we got them. And so I was no longer a volunteer driver with Metropolitan Flaming Services. I was taking people to get their booster shots, and I eventually started taking people to appointments like I was doing before. And then senior center role. So I was, prior to the pandemic, I was doing these events, but now I am doing these things online. So this top picture here was during the monthly extravaganza, and we went to a Mexican restaurant, and it was just like so much fun. So I kind of miss doing those things, but those are the kind of things that we're doing prior to the pandemic that we're now slowly bringing back. So some key takeaways. One, technology can definitely be a barrier for older adults. Not all older adults. In fact, when I started the Wednesday group, they call themselves the Wednesday Geezers. That was their name, not mine. They knew technology better than I did because they were more in tune. They were more used to using it than I was. And there was definitely resistance from many older adults initially, but that changed over time. I did notice that as the pandemic lingered on, I saw more receptivity among older adults to sort of try these different platforms. I think they were hearing from their cohorts, like, you might want to try this. And so there was definitely more receptivity since the beginning. Training and financial supports make it as age-friendly as possible. So the way that we were incorporating the training was done in a very respectful way. And the other thing I'm learning is to be sure that you have things that are not technology dependent. If you're able to manage things, like Darlene was talking about the RV group that goes around and builds. If that's not dependent on technology, that's great. Maybe some people are in terms of the coordination, but if they just know we're driving to this city in this day, that's awesome. But I think what I'm seeing is that since technology is now changing so much, we are becoming more involved with it, and not everyone is there yet. I'm also seeing that hybrid meetings provide a way for everyone to get involved. So I'm seeing that more and more. The Senior Center, for example, has an advisory committee comprised of older adults, and some people prefer to go to the Senior Center and have it there in person, and then they also have it through the Zoom link, so people can still stay at home and participate virtually. Intergenerational, this kind of gets to what Darlene was talking about. So again, without the support of AmeriCorps, we really wouldn't have got off to as good of a start as we did with the Zooming Senior. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it was not planned. And they were able to develop age-friendly training resources that has helped us with the additional cohorts. And here's something I didn't know about. I'm sure you all do, Youth Builders. I stumbled upon them by accident because they are doing some work here at the local senior center. I actually went into a room thinking I was going into the AARP Safe Driver class to learn more, and that's not what was going on. I was in the wrong room. But they're around the country. There's 165 locations. Some of you may be involved with them, but for me, it's like, oh my goodness, this is the best thing since sliced bread. They have a once a month drop-in for seniors. Really impressed with how they are able to provide hands-on support. And then they're able to match up younger folks with older adults. And I just observed so much respect between the generations, and that is something was just surprising to me. I didn't even know that it exists, and apparently this is done all over the country. So just learned about that in the last month or so. Oh my goodness, who is that? Oh my God, what is he up to now? Oh my goodness, love that colorful hair. I wish we could have that now. It's very cold here. So I created an anthology, as Darlene mentioned earlier. This is a number of stories and poems that came out of the groups that I was facilitating. I must have did a couple hundred of these groups, and I'm still doing them now as a volunteer. And most of the storytellers are older adults, and there was just a lot of resilience that came through in these stories, and I was afraid that we would lose them if we didn't put that in a book. So I was really motivated to do that. We did that. It was just published a few months ago, and then we just started taking it on the road last month. We did 5 book tours around Oregon. We went as far as Bend, Oregon, which is about 3.5 hours away from here. It's in Central Oregon. And what was really heartwarming for me is many people who are strangers were just so touched by the words that people were just like hugging. And we had Q&A with the folks, and we had book signings, and it was just so powerful. And it's really kind of encouraged me to offer more of these into the next year as well. So this is some of our storytellers. This is the one on the far left, I believe, is at Beaverton Library. The other 2 on the right is Hollywood Senior Center. And I really like the fact that older adults are front and center, sharing their experiences, sharing their vulnerabilities, but also sharing what they've learned through the pandemic. Okay, quote from Robin Williams. And we get to have Q&A. Yes, and I'm assuming the chat box is still functioning, even though I can't see it because I don't have the right slides up.
Yes, it is, Paul. And I had not heard of Youth Builders, so I did a quick search and I put in the chat the link to the Portland Youth Builders so you could see.
Thank you.
A little bit more about that organization. So I guess, I have a quick question while people are thinking, and I think
Sure.
it's great to maybe have more people, if they'd like to input what they might have done to help accommodate, older volunteers or just for inclusion. It is, what kind of stereotypes do you think are a hindrance for, and I know this is a big generational thing, but what kind of stereotypes do you think are the ones we should watch out for the most?
That's a good question. I think the best thing is to not make assumptions, right? Is to just not make assumptions. And I think there's a number of reasons, why technology is problematic. And I think, at least from my experience, many older adults didn't really have like the latest technology, if you will. And sadly, that kind of put them in a difficult situation. So quick example, when we did the Zooming Seniors with the grant, if you can imagine this, we basically did this illegally because the governor had a mandate, everything was shut down. And we were at the closed senior center, and people came, and we did, one-on-one coaching. And 2 women came to the back door at the same time. And I don't know, I'm probably aging myself, but it was like that commercial with George Foreman. I'm not going to pay a lot for this muffler. Each woman had an iPad, and their children gave them to them, but they just didn't know how to use it. And it turned out that one of the women, she's in a 12-step program. She's in recovery. And because her computer at home was so dated, she wasn't able to fully participate in her 12-step program, right? So she didn't have the webcam, and she didn't have good speakers, and it really affected her mental health. And so once we just paired her up and had her with her own iPad that she had, she was able to hear much better with the built-in speaker, and she had the webcam. And it was just like her world went from black and white to color. She's like, oh my goodness. And so she was just so excited because she could fully participate in her recovery again. She was an active member of the group, and she also wasn't able to access her telehealth appointments with her doctor. So it just changed. And so I think the big thing is, I think there's just a lot of just generational divide. We can't make assumptions, but at the same time, I think is to be able to provide opportunities for engagement. That's,
I've got another question, Paul, and
thank you.
thank you for that. And if
Sure.
it's okay, I'm gonna bring this up in the context of hospice volunteering. I know this person works in hospice, and wondering if you're seeing seniors returning in person volunteering. Is that a bigger trend now?
Is a bigger trend to be in-person volunteering? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that people are returning to.
Yes, I'm definitely seeing that, at least at the senior center. So a couple of thoughts on that. One is the people who were engaged before and the volunteers, many of them are coming back, but also people like myself, I have to be honest, when they asked me to come back to being like an official volunteer, I was like, I don't think so. I'm good. And because I didn't want to have to fill out all the forms, and I'm just being selfish here, and take the driving classes, and every 3 months send in my insurance information. And it was like a lot of stuff, which I was gladly doing before, but now I'm doing it my own way. But I think with volunteers, many of them were very interested in coming back. And at the same time, some volunteers are just not going to come back. There's still a lot of fear about COVID, and some places have masking requirements and some don't. And so I think we've lost some volunteers because of that. The other thing I want to say is every Tuesday, well, actually now it's twice a month, we do the Hollywood group that I started in 2020 is still continuing. Like I just started as a one-time thing, it's still happening. And the senior center reached out to me and they said, hey, Paul, we're opening. This is back several months ago. Do you want to bring your group to the center? And I'm like, I don't know, let me ask the older adults. And every single person said, no, we're good. We don't want to return to the center. And what's interesting about that is I have people who just appreciate having sort of like this privacy and don't want all the background noise, the senior center. I have one person who's got a lot of mobility issues, and she's able to be more independent, she says, by participating through virtual than she would having to rely on somebody for a ride to get to the center and that kind of thing. So I think it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of how people are returning.
Thank you very much. And I'm really curious to, okay, we've got another question, but I'm curious to hear, if other folks are experiencing that as well. And here's a question from Jerry. I have concerns over the economic inequities, the cost of devices, internet connection in one's homes, comfort with tech support. What did you discover about these issues? Thanks.
Yeah, I didn't know that Internet Essentials existed before. And I was grateful to find that out. And so we had, when we did the Zooming seniors, we had sort of like a case management type person, and she was helpful because she would help fill out the applications. And I believe it's $9.95 a month, which is very affordable. And I know that there's also this broadband discount too through cable. So the cost of internet is becoming more and more affordable. I think that local governments are looking at that as seeing that this should be utility, like that was mentioned from the person in San Francisco in the slide earlier, is like, this really needs to be, we need to have equity in terms of access to the internet. Let's see. Was there another part of that question? I just want to make sure I'm answering it in full, Gretchen.
Cost of devices, internet connection, and comfort with tech support.
Yes, yes. I think those are all there. That's why when I saw the youth builders, I really liked what they were doing, because I saw older adults that had the newer technology, but they just didn't know what to do with it. And so they were able to get hands-on, like what's most important to you, like somebody actually asking you, is it about email, do you like to text, and really trying to make it be as user-friendly as possible. Like, I don't need all these other things, I just need to do A, B, and C and do it well. Can you help me with that? And that just doesn't really exist well. I have quite a few older adult friends who just dread having to go to like the Verizon store, because my friend Jim will say, every time I go there, they say, well, you have a really old phone and you need to upgrade. And he's like, I just want to know how I can do XYZ. And it's just this, it's like hit or miss with staff. So I think having more of a tailored approach to helping people access that. I know in Portland, for example, we have Free Geek, which does some great stuff. They resurrect old computers. People bring in their computers and they repurpose them. And so you can get technology at an affordable price. They do a lot of training. So I think the more that we can have these public-private partnerships, the more, like with the youth builders, I'm really encouraged by people seeing that as a barrier and trying to find solutions. We have a long way to go, but there's definitely some infrastructure in place.
Okay, Paul, I've got a question from Janelle, and Janelle, I'm going to allow you to talk because you raised your hand.
Yay! Thank you.
Go ahead. Make sure you unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hello.
Okay. Yes. Okay, great. So during the pandemic, we transitioned our volunteer onboarding process to virtual, which was in the works anyway, but we rolled it out during the pandemic. And it has continued to be virtual, but we have done some things like offer like in-person help sessions where volunteers can come and sit with us one-on-one, and we can walk them through the steps. And then what we're finding though is that not everyone is really even receptive to that. We partnered with our local library to offer basic like technology classes too for volunteers, and no one came. So I saw in your bullet points that you said like one of the keys was on how to like gently and respectfully encourage volunteers to take these steps toward learning new technology. I was just wondering if you have any advice for that.
Yeah, I think what I've learned is that there's always early adopters and there's some cheerleaders out there. And I think that's what we saw happen, and why we were able to get the additional cohorts come on board, is that there was a lot of resistance initially. And remember how I said, like, over time, there was less resistance and people are like, oh, tell me more. So-and-so is taking that Zooming Seniors group. So I think if we have older adult sort of role models, if you will, that goes a long way. And also involving input from older adults in terms of like, what would this look like? If we were to design something, you know, what would make you want to come? What would make some of your friends want to come to this? And I think that's just kind of like what happened, is that they realized when we removed so many of those barriers, the word on the street got out as like, they're going to give you an iPad, like they're going to provide you with a Chromebook or whatever it is. And it's really not that hard. And one of the things I noticed when we did the Zooming Seniors, for example, is like the people who came with the iPads, there was this whole big fear about where is this? Where's the keypad? Like, I need this. And we're like, well, you don't really need a keypad. And they're like, I'm not going to pay a lot for this muffler. So I think a lot of it was like, we just have to do the hands-on and to be able to guide the conversation skillfully. Yeah, and I think the other thing about that is, just kind of going at the pace that people need to go at, and to not like overextend, but to see like what makes sense. And I think just over time, we've just been fortunate maybe. I did notice that there was another group getting a grant at the same time we did. And the reason why they were not successful is, and I'm just saying this because we violated laws. I'm just telling you, we were sort of 6 feet away at the long table, but we were masked up and everything. But there was a lot of concern about COVID. Well, with this grant, they would only do the technology training online. And that was a problem because people couldn't get online, but they wanted to make sure the volunteers were safe. And so I understand it's a complex issue. So obviously, the more hands-on You can make it like with the youth builders coming in. Like right now with the youth builders, there's a line of seniors just waiting for that. So I guess another way of looking at that is are there some stepping stones that we could have in place by establishing something like bringing youth builders to a local senior center, getting some trust and buy-in, seeing how that goes, and then seeing if we can extend that a little bit more, leverage that into the broader community.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Janelle. Great questions.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much, Janelle. And I've got a comment from Darlene, and it says, I love diving in to find out what our retired volunteers can bring to our organization in terms of skills and background. Sometimes you can find that there are volunteers that have an amazing amount of education and professional background and skills that can be utilized.
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to involve technology necessarily, or it could to a certain degree. And I think that's an excellent point, is sort of like, what is the inventory that we have out there? And what are some of the questions that maybe we're not asking to get at the richness, the wisdom that older adult volunteers have? Thanks, Darlene.
Got a comment here from Shirley, a question.
Yeah.
Is there hands-on technical support for seniors who are not connected to any volunteer organization, but who need the regular online connection? And I know this person is calling from Boise, Idaho area.
Okay, could you repeat the question? I want to make sure I'm understanding it, Gretchen.
Yeah, is there hands-on technical support for seniors who are not connected to any volunteer organization, but who need the regular online connection?
Yeah, I wonder if the libraries would play a role in that. The local libraries, if they have something available. I also wonder about the local area agency on aging, if they have any kind of programming with some of their contract agencies like senior centers and places like that. Is this person from a rural area in Idaho? Do we know?
No, I know her, and she lives.
Oh, okay.
Boise, so no.
Boise, okay, because
Yeah.
I know that there's definitely more challenges in rural areas. Yeah, I would think libraries, and I would go to area agencies on aging or senior centers and just ask around, and also maybe 211 might have some ideas as well.
Great idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shirley. More questions. Paul,
Yay.
such great resource. Please. And I was wondering, you know, as you're doing this, what's you know, again, talking about stereotypes and, you know, what to be careful of, and like you said, make no assumptions. When I worked for AARP, at the beginning, I would be in meetings and all of the older adult volunteers would have iPads or the latest iPhone, and I didn't have one. I was kind of like, well, so many folks were early adopters, which made it nice. But, you know, I think when I first started in the early 2000s, I would say probably 95% of our volunteers had no email address and didn't use email, and would be darned if they were going to. But by the time I left, about 7.5 years later, it was the other way around. Only 5% then did not have access to email. And then I was running into more and more volunteers who, you know, they were like, well, as a matter of fact, I worked for IBM in the 60s and helped create part of that platform, you know. So it is important not to make those assumptions, because the world has changed so quickly now. For someone that's in their, you know, late 50s or 60s, they were around when all this was being born.
Yes, I think, yeah, while it's important not to make assumptions, I think there's some, we're seeing as people are aging in place now. Like, again, I just turned 60, so I kind of know some of the stuff, yet at the same time, I'm not really able to share screen as well as I'd like to. But I know that when I worked for the Area Agency on Aging, when the Part D benefit came on board, it was around 2006, I believe, there was just such mass hysteria and panic because most of the information was available online. Like, go to medicare.gov and you can compare plans. And so I was overseeing the SHIBA program, also called SHIP in other parts of the country, the senior health insurance benefits. And we just saw back then the people who are 65 and older not as comfortable with technology. And every year thereafter, when I was there, you would see a shift, and more people who were turning 65 would be more comfortable with technology, and then the questions would change, and they'd ask more complex questions about, well, why doesn't the drug finder do this, and how come da da da? And it's like, oh well. So I think we're seeing that gradual shift and change as people are aging. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the age spectrum, the person who's 100 plus, again, they may not know computers as well as someone who's much younger.
Thanks, Paul. I've got
Yeah.
a couple more comments and questions.
Excellent.
One is, does anyone know if faith-based organizations who might be connected to folk not normally connected to senior centers, or could they play a role? So faith-based organizations that might be connecting people.
I don't know. I know that in Portland, some of them have senior ministries. So I know that there are some local churches. I don't know about some of the other religions, but they have sort of a senior ministry where they will go out and work with their older adult parishioners, provide sort of social support. I know that, I'm trying to think, this is not faith-based, but in Portland, Project Linkage, which is through the Metropolitan Family Services, they have a program where they can go into homes and do minor home repair, try to make it more, make it safer, like change light bulbs, or, try to help mitigate any kind of dangerous situations in the home, like tape down throw rugs or get rid of the throw rugs, things like that. But in terms of faith-based, it's a great question. I'm not sure if anybody else on the call has any ideas. Maybe just add that to the chat.
Yeah, we do have a comment from Joanna Brown. Thank you. It says some Salvation Army locations have programs for senior. Dayton, Ohio has one.
Great. Yeah, I know in Portland they do as well. Actually, they have the Rose Senior Center, but I think it closed during the pandemic, and I'm not sure if it's back open yet. So yeah, great idea.
And Janelle, I see that you had your hand up again, but you also put in the chat. So I will. I've got one more comment here from Adrienne, and then I'll go to Janelle. I found, and so Adrienne says, I found tech communications with older adults much more easily because overall they check their emails more often. Teens and Gen Z often want to be texted to check their email.
Yes. Yes. I am finding in my own personal life that the older adults in my life are getting on board with the texting. And I also know some old adults that still do not have email. And so texting helps alleviate that. But yeah, I would agree that younger folks are more inclined to want the text as opposed to the email. The email just seems so formal or so whatever. They don't want to go there. It's like a snail mail to them. Everything just changes so quickly. Yeah.
Great. And let's see. So Janelle has said, as a follow-up, like Paul mentioned himself, I have seen other volunteers who have not returned to volunteering because they do not want to deal with our standard processes of online applications, background checks, and annual trainings. Any thoughts on how to encourage folks to comply?
That's a good question. I think that's worth exploring, in another forum to give it the time, because, I really kind of felt badly when I was asked to come back. And I just thought, oh, like I'd rather just, and I think I can't speak for other volunteers, but I think it's just easier for me to be a volunteer and be a free agent and just sort of do it without sort of like, I would say, the restrictions of that. But in terms of volunteering, I'd have to give it some thought. I would love to hear maybe what other people, I know we're getting down on the time, but what if others have some suggestions about that. I think it really gets back to the mission, like why volunteer, like what's really needed. And if there's a unmet community need that needs volunteers is to sort of approach that from that emotional humanitarian level. That's the best that I can think of top of my head.
Great comment from Adrienne. Says, I used to tell people you only need to do it once.
Yes, but I will say that there's, at least for the driving thing, there was the bloodborne pathogen training, and it was like this, and like it was like a lot of paperwork. And I understand, because you have to document everything so you can get funding and all of that. So, but it's not the reason. Like, if we didn't have the pandemic, I would still be doing it, and I wouldn't be talking about this. It's just this whole thing came up during the pandemic, and I kind of like it. So.
Mhm. Right. Darlene says, I think you have to offer an alternative way, not just an online option. Have an iPad on site and help them, or go back to paper.
Yeah.
Kelsey says, and I'm hope you're okay with me reading these, because I know you've got your screen
Yes.
covered.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
But for the recording, it's also nice too. I agree with Paul about speaking to the mission and volunteers' emotions. We recently, as a staff, got together and wrote out all the motivations that volunteers have. This has helped for us to keep in mind as we speak to volunteers and recruit new ones. Excellent idea, Kelsey.
Great. Remember what I said earlier about that toolbox? You are the toolbox, like right here. I love this exchange and this idea sharing, because we need all of you. I mean, we need all these great, fresh ideas. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a great exercise to do, especially for staff working with volunteers. When they, I think we need to connect with them on a regular basis to make sure that that light bulb is coming on for them, so they can understand how that light bulb is coming on for the volunteer.
Yes.
Adrian says, I also told people the why behind training and background checks, which you think, again, and we're always in it, we're in the weeds. You think that people would just know and they would just get it, but that's not always the case.
And we want to make sure, I mean, I totally get that. I mean, we want to make sure that we're providing a safe, I've submitted myself to several background checks, and there's a part of me as a volunteer that's saying, can't you just all keep it somewhere? You know what I mean? Because I do a background check for the senior center, I do it one from here. It's like this, so it just feels a little redundant as a volunteer, but I understand why. We don't want to have people who have bad motives out there interacting with vulnerable people. So I get it. And at the same time, I can see the barriers. Looks like we have Adrian.
Yeah. I love the comment about the why, but I used to work at an animal shelter, and we're talking about background checks. People would ask a lot about it. And one thing I would say is like, hey, we want to make sure like you don't have any animal related crimes. And then they got it and they were like, oh God, yeah, like we're going to do this. And so giving them the why and telling them how it was important for us helped them get over that threshold. But there were also people who were like, I will not get an email address. Like, I will not give you my phone number. I just want to show up to do what I want to do. And I had to tell them, like, that's your choice and you can help animals, but you can't do it with us.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's a good point.
Right.
Yeah.
Darlene has put something great in the chat, and I think I'll just segue after this. Darlene, you can do the follow-up slides because we're almost at our half an hour. The Ignatian Volunteer Corps IVC provides men and women, most age 50 or better, opportunities to serve others and to transform lives. IVC matches the talents of experienced volunteers with the great social needs of our time. Is that a faith-based group, Darlene?
It is, and it was just shared with me recently from one of our Habitat affiliates. They are doing a DEI presentation, and they're doing a lot of research related to home ownership in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and how the areas that are traditionally Black or individuals of color have birth rates that are lower. And so they have someone who is doing research for them, and they got them through this organization. And again, it's for individuals who are 50 plus who have some sort of skill or professional background, and they seem to be having a really great experience using this organization, but it is faith-based. Yes. All right. Well, Paul, thank you so very much
Thank you.
for being with us today and sharing your experience with us. And I encourage everyone to follow Paul on Our Bold Voices and check out his book, COVIDology, as well. And Paul, I don't know if you can put in chat where they can find that book, maybe a link to where they can purchase that.
Sure.
But thank you again for sharing your time with us today. Really, we are grateful for having you. And wanted to just quickly share with everyone that we do have a lot of things coming up over the next 2 months at Alive. I did want to highlight 2 events that are happening. The first one, November 30th, is the Alive annual meeting. You can register for that on the Alive website. And then on December 9th is our next Alive Academy with Kayla Paulson, and Kayla will be talking about service enterprise and giving an introduction. So you won't want to miss that session on December 9th. You can register again on the Alive calendar. There are other sessions and events going on, so check it out. And if you aren't already a member of Alive, I encourage you to consider joining. We have multiple different types of memberships: individual, organizational, and professional organizations. You can find all that information online on the website as well. And Gretchen, thank you for just being the angel that you are. Gretchen is our Alive Association Manager. She helps to run these Alive Academies, but also does, it's just like 1% of her role with Alive, and she is just the master of all. So thank you, Gretchen. If you do need any help, Gretchen is happy to help you or guide you, and her email is there, manager@volunteeralive.org. So thank you to all of you for spending time with us today, and we hope to see you at the next Alive Academy and the annual meeting.
Thank you, Paul, so much. It was great to see you.
Same here. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody. Have a great afternoon.